What we do here is go back.
Hello friends and welcome to my new video. So today's video is about jazz obviously, and this is a very important video to me because actually ever since I started uploading videos on YouTube I wanted to do a video about a jazz starters kit or jazz records, jazz albums for beginners, and I know that there are so many good other videos about this topic on YouTube already and I watched every single one of them. But nevertheless, I want to give my point of view about jazz albums for beginners, and actually I want to structure this video in 3 parts. So the first part will be about how I got into jazz and how my collecting history is. The second part will be of course about 10 album recommendations, and the last part will be about why jazz is so important to music history and why it's such a brilliant genre of music, and also why I decided to choose a special era for this video. So yeah, I can't wait to start to show which records I selected, and I can't wait. Let's go! Alright, let's start. So first some general words about the genre and how I got into it. Actually, I was watching a lot of videos by a guy called Dan in Canada on YouTube. It was in the earliest days of the VC, and old members will still remember him. And he made a video about his jazz collection and Kind of Blue, and that was back in 2008 I think, and I didn't know anything about jazz. Of course I've heard about the term and I heard some songs, but I never listened to an entire album, and he got me into jazz. He showed his collection and I saw Kind of Blue and some other records, and those were the first ones I bought. And back then I also bought this book which is called The Great Book of Jazz, in German language of course, and it was written by John Fortham, so there might be an US copy in English language as well. And this is a fantastic book about the entire genre, about the instruments, about all subgenres, and about some classic albums, some special artists, and this is this is awesome. It really helped me in the early days, and I read the entire book 2 or 3 times, and then I really started to get in love with the whole genre, and it became like an obsession, and it still is. And that's how I got into it. And in today's video I would really like to show 10 albums that are perfect for beginners, easy albums that aren't challenging you too much and that are fun listening to. And like I said, there are other videos about this topic, but when we're talking about jazz, you always have to keep in mind that the genre started in the early 19th century, and so if you want to capture the whole genre, keep in mind that we're talking about almost 120 years, so that's almost impossible. And you also have to keep in mind that actually in the early days there were only live bands and live musicians playing live, because there wasn't the technology of recording music. So my aim is to show records that come from what I call a golden era, and of course I'm talking about the 1950s and 1960s in general, and to my mind that in a way was the first peak of jazz history, because we had the ability to record music on vinyl, and all of these records became classic albums. And I know that this might be a controversial point of view, but that's at least what I think. And it's so much fun listening to these records from that period of time, and then while you're listening you can read about the time and think about and imagine how it must have been living in New York in the late 1950s. And to my mind that's beautiful, and I also love to exchange myself with other people about this topic, and I also love to invite people to bring their jazz records, and then we sit down and play records for each other, and after that we talk about them. That's awesome. But I'm already talking too much. I want to show 10 of my recommendations that I choose for this video, and I can't wait to show which ones I picked. So the first one might be a bit surprising. It's the soundtrack to the movie The Pink Panther, of course conducted, and the music is by Henry Mancini, a great guy. If you don't know anything about jazz, this might be a very good start, because you all know the famous theme, and after you listen to the theme, there is a lot of more stuff going on this record, and this can be found very cheap. And if you don't know anything about jazz, this might be a very good record to start. Up next, another very, of course, all of the next albums will be big album classics, and this one is Time Out by the Dave Brubeck Quartet, recorded and released in the magical year of 1959. It's a classic from start to finish. Love the cover art, love the music. It's an audiophile highlight. This is a classic records pressing, by the way, and it was released on Columbia on the 6i label. And this is also a very famous and easy to start record. Take 5 is the famous song. I'm sure you've all heard it before. And this is just like a perfect record to start. Up next is Kenny Burrell, Midnight Blue. I choose this record because this might be very good for all people who like the guitar and the sound of the guitar, and maybe guitar albums in general. So this is also very relaxed, very laid back. I always listen to this record in the Christmas time, or also late at night. It's called Midnight Blue for some reason. And this is also beautiful music, very slow. You can really hear every single note of his guitar, and I'm sure that a lot of you, if you don't know it, that you would dig this one. So Kenny Burrell, Midnight Blue. Up next is one of the first 2 records of genre jazz that I ever bought. It's Chet Baker Sings. Recorded and released in 1954, originally as a 10-inch, but this is a reissue as a 12-inch on, I think, Pan American, Jazz Wax maybe. And I first heard this record in the movie The Talented Mr. Ripley, which is also a beautiful movie, by the way, and it has this very famous and beautiful vocal version of My Funny Valentine. I love his interpretation, and this is awesome vocal jazz. So there's always the instrumental side of jazz, but also vocal jazz. And no matter if you're a fan of the big classic ladies or male vocal jazz, it's always a great choice, and I can highly recommend this one, Chet Baker Sings. Up next is a record by the Bill Evans Trio. So this is some classic trio jazz. It's called Waltz for Debby. You just have 3 instruments, and this is also an audiophile highlight and a great album for jazz beginners, because it's easy to listen to, it doesn't hurt anyone, and you can just put this on, sit on your sweet spot, relax, and take a deep breath, and just enjoy yourself while listening to this. Yeah, great album. I just bought this upgrade copy some month ago. Perfect record. Same for the next one, which again is on Blue Note. This is Something Else by Cannonball Adderly. It features Miles Davis, Hank Jones, Sam Jones, and of course Art Blakey on the drums. And this is also a very beautiful album. Autumn Leaves is a great jazz standard track that I love, and to my mind on this one is one of the best versions ever recorded. This was released in 1958. This is also a classic records pressing, and if you don't know it, be sure to check it out. Big recommendation. Of course, saxophone is one of my favorite instruments in jazz, and this is Sonny Rollins, Saxophone Colossus. A heavy weight of jazz, and this is a German OJC pressing, and I often use this record to test out my stereo system, my hi-fi system, and it has beautiful melodies, beautiful sax, Max Roach on the drums, beautiful. Be sure to listen to this one, Saxophone Colossus. Up next, a little change. So there's also Latin and Brazilian influence in jazz. This is Gets Gilberto, released on Verve in 1964, also very famous, love the yellow blackish album cover, and The Girl from Ipanema is the most famous track, of course. This is a Speaker's Corner pressing and also an audiophile highlight and a perfect summer record. Same for the next one, again some Latin influence. This is Song for My Father by the Horace Quintet, again on Blue Note. This is a Japanese pressing, and this is also, it has this famous and repetitive melodies on the piano, and a beautiful record. I also love to listen to this in the summertime, and great album, Song for My Father. Alright, last but not least, the biggest classic for jazz music history. Everything has been said about this album. Of course, I'm talking about Miles Davis' Kind of Blue. It was the first record that got me into jazz, and it still has its magic. I read an entire book about this album a couple of times, and it never gets old. I got 4 copies in my collection, and to my mind the best sounding one is the Classic Records version, but I also would, if you just start, I would recommend this Sony Legacy reissue, which I just got for $10, and I'm about to frame it to the wall. And this is very cool piece for my collection. This is a UK earliest pressing. This is a second UK pressing released in 1960. Beautiful stuff. And last but not least, of course, I also got the Mo-Fi box set, which I don't like at all. To my mind, it does sound way too fat, but that's another topic. But musically, the album, there is an own documentary about it on YouTube, and this is some essential stuff. Alright friends, so those were my recommendations, but I also would love to say some words about why jazz is so important to me. Jazz is acoustic music, and we're always talking about instruments like drums, like double bass, like guitar, saxophone, trumpet, and various other ones, but actually they are all acoustic and they are natural in a way, and that's why I love to listen to it, because it's natural music, and that's, you know, you can really hear the instruments that when you're listening to a pop record or to modern stuff, electronic music. You always have a, I mean it sounds stupid, but you always have something like a computer and digital technology in it. But jazz really comes back to the roots, and that's what I like about it. And I also love the development of the genre, starting and coming from earliest blues and roots music, going through all these decades and developments to modern stuff. Like I said, we're talking about almost 120 years, and a lot has happened in this period of time. And that's why I just decided to show just like the 1950s and 60s, because of course there is free jazz, fusion, bebop, swing, jazz, funk, and I don't know, there are so many subgenres, and it can be so much fun discovering all of them. But like I said, this is a video for jazz beginners, and I'm sure that these 10 albums might be a good start. Might be a good start at some point. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to like, comment and subscribe, and let me know what you think about my recommendations. Of course, you can post some album titles as well, and I'm really curious to read what you have to say about this topic. And yeah, thanks again, have a great weekend, bye bye.